Okay, let's keep going through a little examples. So this is pretty much orienteering or land navigation 101. All right, you want to, let's say you're standing here at the base of, like right here, at this little point. You know that's where you're at. Okay, you know your location, and you want to get to this point over here. Actually, let's do something further down. So let's say you want to get to this point. Okay, so you know you're here, and you know what place on the map you want to get to. What you're going to do is you're going to line up that direction of travel line. So you're standing right here. Okay, you don't even worry about your magnetic needle ever when you're doing this. Okay, you always just do it the same way. Whether you're using the tape method or whether you're using this method, you're just not going to look at this needle at all. Okay, so you're going to line up this direction of travel arrow, just like that. Okay, between these 2 points. So that's the way you're going, is that way. Now, here's the mistake you don't want to make. You want to make sure that these orienteering lines are facing north. Okay, so this orienteering arrow should always be aligned north with these lines. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, again, we're going to try to make these lines parallel with one of these lines. So we are going to do that. Let's see if I can zoom that in for you. Okay. Now you can see that this line here, this red line, is pretty much parallel with this line here coming down. So that line's right there. So there you go. Okay, so now we've set our compass to the correct setting. So we would take it off, and we would, again, physically rotate our body, whichever way we're standing, to, boom, that direction. And then we would start walking in that direction, okay? And so we would start walking from here, and because we've rotated our body, and now that's the direction we're heading, that we have basically just set a bearing between these 2 points. We have set our compass in this direction here. Okay, so now we're going to be walking there. Now here's the mistake you could make. Let's do that same thing. Okay, so you see my compass here is set at 140 degrees. Or 150 degrees. Okay, so in the southeast direction, and you can see here on the map that is southeast, so that's correct. Here's the mistake people make. So let's say, again, we're trying to walk from this point to this point. Okay, we're going to make sure our direction of travel arrow is denoting that. That's the direction we're trying to go, right there. Okay, here's the mistake people make with that. Okay, so we got those 2 points lined up. Sometimes people will make what we call the 180 degree arrow. So what they'll do is they'll line up these orienteering lines, but they will do it with the orienteering arrow facing south. Like, let's see, like this, okay? And so now you see this red orienteering line here is lined up parallel to this line, okay, roughly, just like that. And so it's lined up, but the problem is that this this north is supposed to be going, these are north-south lines here. So this line is going to magnetic north. So we want to make sure that this orienteering arrow is facing north. These lines can be parallel, but this is south. So this is called a 180 degree error. And now if we were to, okay, say, all right, and rotate our bodies to that direction, okay, here's the problem. Our compass is now set on northeast instead of southeast. So if we were standing at this location and we made that error, instead of walking this way, we would be walking in the complete opposite direction we would need to go. Okay, that's called the 180 degree error. So all you want to do is when you're using this method, you want to make sure, you line the 2 points up, and you don't just line it up on any side. Okay, you want to line it up with the direction of travel arrow, the way you want to go. And then you want to make sure that this north orienteering arrow is aligned with these north-south lines, just like that. Okay, so pretty much we're learning how to measure angles on a map. Okay, we're learning how to measure angles on a map. So let's do another example of, trying to figure out an angle You know, we can even measure angles. Okay, so let's say we want to figure out, this hilltop, we want to figure out, this angle or whatever. Okay, so we can simply draw a relatively straight line here between the top of this hill and this point. Okay. Like that. All right, and we want to figure out what angle that is. Same thing. You're just going to put that on there. Put that with a line there. Okay, and we found that that is a 37-degree angle there. Okay, we can also use this to plot different angles. So if we want to plot a line to, wherever we want to plot it to. Let's say we want to plot it due east, okay, from this position. Now what we would do here is we would set it on the direction we want to plot. So we want to plot a line going due east for whatever reason. Then you're going to simply put the middle of the compass right there over that and line up those orienteering arrows just like that where they're lined up. Or I guess, I'm sorry, you should put the edge of the compass right there. Okay, and then line those up. You see that's lined up right there, parallel. And then there you go. And you've just plotted a line due east. Okay, when you can see there it intersects perfectly with our north-south line. All right, so, you can fool around with this, play around with it a little bit. The main thing you want to remember, if you're using the tape method, when you're doing all of this on the map, ignore the tape, okay? Completely ignore the tape. You don't want to, for example, if we had that little piece of tape on there, you wouldn't want to line these 2 points up and then try to line up the tape with this line, okay? That's going to mess you up. You're going to line it up like the tape's not even there, and then once you take the map away and you're actually rotating your body to figure out what angle, to get to line this up and put the needle in the housing, then you're just going to use the tape at that point. So you're going to ignore the tape when you're actually plotting it and then use the tape. So that's just important to note. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope, this is pretty common knowledge. It's pretty easy stuff. I know if it's your very first time ever learning this, you may be a little confused, especially when I got into the grid north stuff. Sort of had to mention that. So let me reiterate very quickly the grid north thing I was talking about, okay? So, like I said, this map doesn't have a grid on it. And so we would simply just draw north-south lines, okay? If we're using the tape method rather than the other method we just looked at, you would simply line the ruler up perfectly with this, and then there you go. You have your north-south lines just like that. But the point I was making is that, again, some maps already have a grid overlay. If the map has a grid overlay, it's the same. The same problem can happen, is that grid may not be perfectly lined up. It may be a tiny bit off, like 1 or 2 degrees off. So if it's less than 1 degree difference, you can use the grid to pretty much do the same thing we were just doing, okay, with the tape method, all right? And, if it's more than 1 degree variation, if you're looking at this little icon and it has grid north at 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, then you're just going to want to draw on your own north-south lines, okay? Just like we did here, okay? And so that's pretty much it. For orienteering, I mean, it's really, really simple. You're simply saying, okay, I want to get from this point to this point, so which direction do I need to go? And then you're setting that on your compass, and then you're walking, using your compass, you're just walking in that direction. It's really, really simple stuff. So we're going to get into a little bit more of this. We're going to, look at a few more principles, and then we're going to get out into the field a little bit and actually, do some of this stuff. And, the main way to really do this is just to do it. It can be kind of difficult to read in a book or to watch in a video unless you're out there doing it. So go try to figure some of this out that I'm talking about. Maybe even look for more resources that explain this, maybe even better than I can. Because I'm doing my best to explain this. I always have trouble explaining land nav you know, because it's just a kind of a complex topic. So this is a lot more simple. If you're falling behind, you're not quite sure of how to do this. It's actually pretty simple. And so you just kind of have to declination. It always throws my brain for a loop. I always, you know, when I'm learning like the tape method, when I learned that, I probably had to read that thing like 5 times in the book, and I still didn't quite understand how it really worked. But I know how to do it. I just don't, it's just my brain just doesn't want to work with me. But this method, that's why I like the north-south line method. And orienteering maps, okay, orienteering maps, which orienteering is a map and compass sport essentially. They will actually have events where they will hand you a map, and these north-south lines are already magnetic north. So the map itself, orienteering maps are actually, if they're printed where they're already aligned with magnetic north, okay? Because they're usually printed for that specific event. So they just make the map where it's already aligned with magnetic north. Okay, and so then you don't even have to draw lines on it. It'll already have lines